Coming up this week on Meeting Minds, I am so excited. I feel like she's a little bit of a repeat guest, but she's brand new to you guys. You're not going to want to miss this episode of Meeting Minds.
This is Meeting Minds with Charles Ide. Join Charles and his co-host Paige as they chat with leaders in today's events world on how you can take your events to the next level. Broadcasting from the IDECOM studios in Minneapolis, Minnesota, this is Meeting Minds with Charles Ide.
Thank you all for joining me for another episode of Meeting Minds here out of the IDECOM studios in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am so excited for kind of this idea of, Karen Groppe with the Healthcare Information Management System Society, HIMSS. She's the Senior Director of Strategic Communications, is back with me again. I feel bad. We actually had to we recorded a podcast a couple weeks ago, and sometimes technology just doesn't work in your favor. So I get to have her on again. Beauty and flexibility. We have kind of a whole new array of things we're going to cover and just see where the conversation goes. So without further ado, thank you for joining me again, Karen.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you, have you on. Like I told the listeners, this is our second recording of a podcast, but we've even had a couple meetings and conversations prior to this. So I feel like it's just a couple friends catching up. We're going to give our listeners tons of great information. For those listeners, I know you've told me a couple of times, bring them up to speed on who you are and how you got to be the Senior Director of Strategic Communication at HIMSS.
It's a mouthful, isn't it? That's a
bit.
long title. And thrown in with the last name, it could be a lot. So I'm Karen Groppe. I am based right outside of Washington, D.C., born and raised in the area. Have been with HIMSS for, I believe, 7 years. Started my time with them as a contractor, and now I'm a full-time employee. HIMSS is an organization that's known throughout the industry and the world, basically, primarily with our event, which is our global conference, which is exciting. But I like to tell people our global conference is just the punctuation to what we do year round. What HIMSS is that we are an organization of about 110, almost 110,000 members globally that support the transformation of health through information and technology. What that really means is we work with CIOs, in hospital systems, emerging technologies in the health sphere. So we are a group that deals with the health technology.
And so you are on the communication side of things. Communication over the last year has probably looked and felt so different than a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I know not only is it really relevant in your everyday job, but within a lot of the teams and the audiences you're working with and communicating a message for. I know that was kind of the initial topic we wanted to cover. What's your first thoughts on helping our audience in their daily roles of communication with teams?
Well, I think the pandemic taught us a lot of things. The pandemic forced a lot of issues to the front that we all had to deal with. And I think on the HIMSS side of things, one of the things that we were forced to come to terms with at the onset of the pandemic, when we canceled our conference, was that we all need to work together. So our sales team, our exhibit team, our meetings team, and myself and the marketing team came together very closely, very quickly to talk about messaging. And we did a lot of listening to what their challenges were. So it was, the communications teams now know how to hug their meetings teams. And the meetings teams know how to hug us back, the communications professional. We all now know the value that we bring to each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, because so many challenges came out of the first half of 2020. I mean, I don't know about you, but I went into 2020 last January and February feeling like everything was just hunky-dory and great. I mean, 2020 had this initial vision that it was just going to be great, repeatable numbers, really cool things going on. And I know that all kind of came to a halt. How did your team have to shift some of your perspectives and maybe communication processes and that being a really relevant topic? I think like the processes, how do you take what you were doing move those processes and then continue to evolve them as a lot of the work we're doing in the events industry is evolving.
Yeah, well, like you, last January and February in 2020, it was all hunky dory over with us at HIMSS. We were getting ready to set attendance in Orlando. And we also had the sitting president coming to speak at our conference, which was a first. And it was something, take the politics out of it. The fact that a sitting president wanted to come speak live at your conference is a big deal for any conference program. It's just a big deal. So we were excited about that. And then on February 14th of 2020, we posted our first news item of we are monitoring the COVID-19 situation. That was February 14th, 2020. And we're like, oh, it's not going to be that big of a deal. We'll handle it. No handshaking. That was the other one. No handshaking, no hugging. And then it just, as we all know, the gates just opened. We were the first conference to cancel. We canceled a week before the pandemic was declared. So we really had to look to one another to get ourselves through it. And hard times, the best way to get through a hard time is communicate. And we over communicated with each other. So we had daily meetings that we were talking about. We went through each issue. It was a real coming to time together for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. Because you're not only communicating internally, but I think of it as all the different audiences you're communicating with. Because you mentioned that the sitting president was coming. So you not only had to communicate with the media and the White House, but you had to communicate with your attendees, and then sponsors are a different group. And then you have don't you typically have like 14,000 or 1,400 on your exhibit floor?
1,400, 1,400 exhibitors and about 45,000 attendees.
Yeah. So communicating with all of those with the same message and like repeatability, so that message can't be misconstrued too.
Well, that's what we did. So we agreed upon is that we had one statement that we worked off of. And that's what our sales team used to communicate with exhibitors. That's what we were going out to media. I think I read that statement like 100 different times. It was like, well, good question. Let me start, but it was our source of truth. And it kept everyone felt aligned. Everyone felt protected. And then we just built off of that. So we built our FAQs off of that, because when you cancel you took an action to end an event like HIMSS 20, there are a lot of people you have to communicate to quickly. The White House was one little bit of it. The other part was we had attendees who were traveling, who were already coming into Florida. And then there were the exhibitors. A lot of exhibitors were coming in, and then they were saying to their home offices, well, we've made it to Florida. Well, great, turn around and come back. Then we had the press, and then we had a lot of what I call spectators. A lot of people on social media who were providing a lot of commentary about the event. So it was a lot of different audiences, and we had to figure out very quickly who we needed to communicate with first, and what we needed to say to them. And the other audience too, and I think from an industry-wide meeting side, in the city of Orlando that we needed to have conversations with too, because we were now telling their city and their residents, the pandemic is here, it's coming, and this is going to impact your livelihood. Orlando, that's a hospitality town. So we took a lot of time with them as well. It was multiple audiences, but that one single source of truth helped us get through all of the audiences pretty well.
What was the hardest piece or the biggest piece you had to pinpoint in those communications as something that you had to hit and you couldn't forget? And I'm just wondering where that messaging, like how you get to the nugget of information there and kind of blossom off of that.
The nugget was, here are the facts. We had to keep it very factual. We have taken an action to, end HIMSS 2020. We knew a lot, but we had to be factual with that. And then please bear with us. We need to figure this out. And we said in the next 2 weeks, we will have further information about hotel refunds a plan for registration, how we're going to handle registration. And then we're going through terms and conditions with all of our contracts. And terms and conditions covered everything. And that's the one thing about HIMSS. We've been doing this for so long. We know how to protect everyone from a legal standpoint. So it was those kinds of things, but we had to stick to the truth of what we knew at that time. And that's all we were communicating. We were not going to do any, we hope, or it's, here are the facts. This is what we know. We will be back to you in 2 weeks or a week with more information as we know it. So we kept it to just the facts.
Yeah.
And it was hard because people were nervous and angry, and it was just a general chaotic period.
Well, it's so interesting that we're having to redo this podcast together, and the first recording was a couple weeks ago, and this date, this Friday, was what I vividly remember being like the last of everything, the last of like what we used to know as normal. And I would say that when we recorded this podcast together a couple weeks ago, there wasn't much certainty around the rest of 2021 and what people were going to be doing for events. And now just look, a couple weeks later, I mean, there's so much more. I don't know about you, but I feel positivity, new ideas.
Yeah. I feel hopeful. At HIMSS, like the rest of the world, we pivoted very quickly into digital, into the virtual space, because we have so much content. We're a convener, we're a collaborator. So we have close to 800 educational sessions that we do during our global conference. So we had all this content. And we had to repackage that and get that up and get that out. And also what was relevant. And that was a quick turn for us. The other thing that we discovered, or we always knew, was the passion that people felt towards our conference. And that we took away. I said recently to someone, I said, couldn't figure out why people were so angry at us. I mean, I had some ideas, but we ruined their marketing plan. We ruined people's marketing plans. We ended their, grand finale of their marketing campaign.
You mean last year when the cancellation?
Yeah, when we canceled the conference. We ended their marketing campaigns for them. And then I also saw that the people that, what I call the spectators, we have a lot of people on Twitter, that were making the commentary, giving us suggestions on how to run our show, or taking our name, which is the HIMMS name, and setting up their own shows with our own name. So we came to realize, and it was just a chaotic time. We came to realize that HIMMS is just such a brand that people equate with a healthcare conference. We have a lot of information, and the passion behind it was, it added to the chaos because you're now dealing with people's emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, emotions are such a big part of all of this that came out of discovery in the last year that you have to take into account. And it's kind of come up in a lot of the conversations I've had recently as hybrid or a podcast. Someone brought it up the other day. An integrated experience or integrated audience experience, trying to move away from hybrid into talking about how digital and in-person and all of those things meet. So calling it integrated experience, whatever it may be, that we're moving towards in the future, how we make sure we account for all those groups and key learnings. And I was going to ask you, what types of content did you feel like the audience or key pieces of communication you kept going throughout 2020 that set you up for success in 2021?
Well, we're lucky. HIMSS as an organization is lucky. So we deal in health technology, health information technology. And we were spotlight in a pandemic. So all of the content we had around telehealth was very relevant. Content that we had about surveys that we were doing around what works in a pandemic, what technology is working, what technology is needed. We had a lot of insights. We had a lot of experts who could help the big guy, the CIO who's sitting in a multi-location hospital system could share insights with a smaller rural hospital on what kind of technology is working for them. And that was invaluable. The sharing of the information, the understanding of the information, that's something we pivoted quickly on. And then, there's just so much information where the space we sit in around managing the pandemic. How are you tracking your data? How's it being captured? Where's it being captured? Where's the right place to capture? And then once you have all this data, what does that mean? How do you translate that into better health outcomes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all of that playing a role into events reopening. The more technology that came out of those discoveries and conversations, the more events can open and put the technology to use.
Yeah. And the thing for us that was kind of exciting for us, kind of the silver lining, is we forced people to think of us as a thought leader. We always were a thought leader, not an event company, not an event production. When we switched to digital, we moved it away from, we have a lot of smart things to say versus we can put together a really pretty exhibit floor. So it was that the perception of HIMSS as an organization changed, good and bad. People were quite angry for quite a long time that the conference was canceled, and they had concerns on how it was handled due to the terms and conditions. So it was an interesting time to see us mature into a thought leader versus just an event production company. And it's a hard process to make that shift. So we had plenty of time during the lockdown to make that shift. Yeah, that's right. 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 Oh, and it's for us. We know in order as we go into 21 and we move forward to being in person, late third quarter of 21, our hope to be in person, we know that the content's got to be on fire. I mean, it's got to be spot on, phenomenal, strong content. Because now that's what people have come to expect for us. The show has to be flawless as well. And when I say flawless, it needs to be flawless on the health and safety side. The wellness factor. Now we're now dealing with a whole different set of conversations of how are we keeping everybody safe? How are we keeping everyone well? Because in a large scale event, we all now know what can get transmitted amongst us very quickly. I think it's we took for granted in a sense. So you've got content to worry about, you've got a position, and then you have your attendees and their safety and wellness. And that's a lot for meeting planners right now.
Definitely. I feel like pre-2020, 2017, 18, 19, event planners' biggest worry was how do we make sure we communicate when registration is cut off and that hit our maximum numbers and maximum amount of people in a ballroom. Yeah. Now the conversation seems to be shifting, and it's just interesting because you're with a healthcare organization that these questions are popping into my mind around how do you articulate and frame up copy and communication for attendees to make sure that they want to come, but that they know there's not going to be too many people in the room, but enough people to network with. And also, like, the laundry list of things goes on in my head.
So it's funny you bring that up because we did open registration this week for, like I said, for conference, and we had a big debate around it. And it's, you don't want to say, we can't wait to see you. We'll all be there. And I don't want to go into a big crowd. I don't know many people who do at this time, but I do want to get out there. I do want to see people. So it's that, and you don't want to be reckless. So we have to, what we did was we looked at the vaccination rate, and we have milestones now that we're going to look as the country, as the United States gets vaccinated, the percentages, and that's where we're going to have different conversations, and that's how we're going to use different words. Right now, where I think it's like 10% of the United States population is vaccinated right now, I think that's the number. Well, now you don't want to say it's going to be the best event ever with the biggest crowds ever. No one, no one has an appetite for that. We're looking at our safety protocols. We hope to be in Las Vegas. We have a safety and wellness committee working with us. We're working with the city of Las Vegas on safety and capacity issues. Those, safety first. We also have, there are different paths to HIMSS 21, digital and in person. We're exploring both, but it's understanding the appetite. And for us, we're using the gauge of the vaccination rates across the country to introduce different types of conversations. And not like, registration. My role used to be, here's the press release, registration's closing next week, or 45,000 people have registered so far. I mean, those days are gone.
Yeah, very interesting. Because I imagine too, there could be like a tiered opening system or a tiered system of getting back to opening registration. Because if Las Vegas is able to have more people and the vaccination rate continues in X, Y, and Z, maybe you could have more people. More people would be comfortable. So there's a lot of interesting conversations around that.
We know, like next week, for example, casino and catering staff in the city of Las Vegas start vaccinations. The state has bumped them up the line for vaccination.
Oh, wow.
We also know that I believe it's the governor is going to go 50% capacity for restaurants, and the gathering sizes are changing. So there's hope there. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you one thing, we are not putting anybody in a compromised situation where they would feel unsafe. That's just not going to happen. We demonstrated before. That was a very painful decision for us to end HIMSS 20. And if we are not going to be safe in first week in August, we will not be going.
Mm-hmm. It's great learnings from 2020 that you put out there. I mean, you went through the pain points. You don't want to go through them again.
We did go through the pain points. I can't tell you how many times I cried. So.
Oh my gosh, didn't we all? Let those tears be in 2020 and let 2021 be happy tears. I just literally shed a tear this morning because the governor in Minnesota announced as of believe the beginning of April, certain wedding receptions and wedding venues can be at almost maximum capacity, food and drink regulations. But I think you maybe recall from some previous conversations, my colleague Keelan, as well as myself, are both getting married this year. So it's great to see some of those things continue to open and evolve, and just like a happy tear, right? Of like, oh my gosh, like let 21 have all the happy tears.
It's hope. I mean, my parents got vaccinated. They're both fully vaccinated. And I cried. I mean, my dad sent me an email and he was like, and now we're vaccinated. And I was like, we're done. I mean, like, not done, but I'm not going to kill my parents. So I'm with you. I cried too. So.
What are some really interesting advancements as you're looking to potentially have people in person for HIMSS in 2021 that you are thinking, or maybe it's on the forefront of starting to communicate if people will, because a lot of conversations around events are, well, will I have to be vaccinated? Will I have to have testing every day? Is there anything that you guys are exploring around there or can share? I should ask.
Well, here's the great thing. We're a health technology. Our members do health technology. So our members are the ones that are out there on the front lines right now, figuring out how to protect all of us as we go back out, so to speak, into large scale events, into schools and everything like that. So there are a lot of technologies that we're evaluating right now, where one I saw was it could take the temperature. It's a scan. It could be an app. And each morning you turn your camera on your phone and it looks at you and tells you if you have a temperature or not. And if you don't have a fever, there's some kind of scan that they can tell, then you have access to the show. But if you wake up in the morning and you scan your eyes and you have a temperature, you can't get into the show. Those are kinds of interesting.
All the questions. I have so many questions.
I know. And then, the other one you saw during the NBA bubble was the ring that they all wore to collect data to see, they say for COVID, one of the things, a trigger for COVID was elevated heart rate for 3 days before it presented.
Yeah, I saw that on golfers too. They were wearing the
Yeah.
rings and they were wearing the bracelets, and they basically pulled some golfers out of tournaments early, like 3
Right.
days beforehand, because they saw that trend in the elevated heart rate.
Right. And then the other thing is, with vaccines, we haven't made a decision yet. We're still, like the rest of the world, trying to navigating this through. But in the app will probably be, are you vaccinated or not? Or where was your last negative COVID test? We haven't figured that out yet of what that's actually going to be, because we're following the CDC is our North Star. So what they're telling us to do is what we're following. So they are our North Star. So as they're working through that, we're following along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But our members are going to be the ones that are going to help us bring us back into large scale events. And that's exciting.
I was just going to say, it's so cool and exciting to me that we've been able to build a relationship, you and I can feel comfortable asking some of these questions and conversations, because not only are you an events industry leader. I mean, when I started with IDCOM 2.5 years ago, I remember looking up big, large scale event conferences, and HIMSS was one of them, and not really tying the correlation between events and health information management system, society, technology, all of the great things that come out of it. And now it is all about content. It is all about, like, how much information can I get from Karen around what they're thinking and feeling, and large groups of people and protocols. And it's really cool.
Yeah. And I think the one thing we found going through the pandemic, which is kind of like how you and I connected too, is it's the communication. We all now realize, I know with my team, with my exhibits team, my sales team, my meetings team, we all understand each other's value. I think prior to, it was give me some nice copy about when registration opens. Now it's a partnership of, let me tell you what my exhibitors are asking me or telling me. Help me message out to them. This is what I'm thinking. Can we work it together? So it's a real partnerships that these groups have formed. And I think it makes us smarter, better, faster.
Yeah, I agree. I think having all of the appropriate people with a seat at the table, and the right person, right seat. We talk about that a lot with being a small business and wanting to grow. Is it the right person for the role or for the information? Are they in the right seat? They could be a great cultural fit, but are they in the right seat doing the right pieces of communication, and all of that just plays such a value of a great role in the value of integrated teamwork.
Right. Yeah, it's right time, right place. I mean, and are you and understanding if you aren't the right person, to step aside to let the right person in. And the honesty amongst all of us. And I think that was because we all understood our value to each other.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Karen. I know that there's a lot of heartache that came out of 2020, and we're in such a great space to be hopeful and look back on it thinking how much growth was had, and feeling really connected as a team, and all of these really great takeaways where you can talk about being a thought leader and a content manager and great communication, and how all of those pieces tie together with really just a unified message, whether it is shutting something down or opening something back up to your audience. It's all about that unified message.
Right. And it's it's now, as we get ready to go back back out into the world, so to speak, it's such a fast and furious pace to get back out there. I think the one thing we all need to remember is grace that we need to show one another. We're all tired. We're all working from home. We're all working crazy hour days. I always say to my staff, I'm in my pandemic feelings, but I think in order to get to the other side of a successful event, it's grace, it's understanding, it's support. It's just those little things that are going to get us there to that successful spot.
Yeah. Do you feel like when HIMSS 2021 is wrapped up that you will have some closure on all of the work?
When you're talking about crying, with events, I thought to myself, actually this morning, I'm like, if we make it to Las Vegas and the world is a safe place, I will probably bawl like a baby into the descent into Las Vegas, because it was such a hardship we're going to be one of the first large scale events to return if it's safe in August. And that's a full circle. It's been a horrible year. I think it'll be closure. But then we have to turn back around and go back to Orlando in March of 2022. So,
that's a quick turn.
oh yeah.
Lots more content to come out of that, I'm sure, as we reconnect later this year and have you back on to get some of your thoughts and feelings around how 21 went and what you're thinking about going into
come to Las Vegas. Come on down to Las Vegas with us. We'll have space.
Oh my gosh.
I'll be very well spaced out.
You might have to think about that. We're actually going to the Biz Bash Connect event in May in Las Vegas. So if you have any questions or anything you want me to report back on, I'll bring all the knowledge back to you.
Our meetings team is working through, to get onto a site visit because Las Vegas just been new construction. There's new meeting space in Las Vegas that has not been seen yet by anyone.
So, and it's like opening the floodgates. It's like opening Las Vegas back up to the event planners of the world.
It makes me a little nervous. The big city, as we call it, might eat a lot of us while we're out there. So,
here's to buckling up and getting back to it.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Karen. Yes. If anyone has any questions on the content you talked about, or even just like how to communicate with their teams, share a message during all of this, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
My email, which is kgroppe, GROPPE at HIMSS.org.
Thank you for all of your knowledge here today. And
you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Repeating with me. I know it's not always easy to share the same group of information, but I think doing it a couple weeks later, like I said, just put us in a great opportunity for positivity to talk about things reopening, new communication strategies. If any of you out there listening want more information from Karen or just are now intrigued about the world of HIMSS and the great events that they put on, as well as them being a thought leader in the content and healthcare industry, go ahead and check them out. Like she mentioned, HIMSS for HIMSS. They have tons of really cool stuff going on. She can be connected via her email. As always, we'll put some bite-sized pieces of information up on Instagram and our LinkedIn whenever her episode is able to go live. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you back next week for another episode of Meeting Minds.
Thank you for listening to Meeting Minds. Meeting Minds. Brought to you by IDCOM Event Production, changing the world one audience at a time. Follow IDCOM Creative and Meeting Minds podcast on Instagram. And check out meetingminds.org to find show notes for this episode, past episodes, and inspiration. As always, please subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next week for another episode of Meeting Minds.